911, tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. He's hungry and he's thirsty.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and a warm welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. We're all horrified now that we've seen footage in full Technicolor of what was really going on inside the Utah home of Ruby Franke. But I want to look at this case from a woods perspective instead of trees. I want to look at it generally instead of focusing on the details. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind I'll be dealing with the Ramsey case, another look at the John Bonet's America documentary following this analysis, so look out for that. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button and let's get started. Now, I often refer to this channel as authentic and the most authentic voice in true crime, and I get a lot of pushback from people saying that, or they scoff at it, or they don't seem to think it matters. And I think it is something worth striving towards, being authentic, being who you say you are, caring about the truth, and being sincere. I think it does matter, especially in the true crime space. And so here we've got an example of the opposite of that. We're talking about a very successful YouTuber with 2.28 million subscribers. You know, that's more than 10 times as many subscribers as I have, whereas I've put up twice as many videos. Her video views are 1 billion. I'm not even at 50 million. I'm at 42.5 million views. Now, I'm only giving you my stats to show you just the extent of this, the success of this YouTuber. It's incredible success. And the irony is that Utah's now infamous moms of truth were offering parental classes when they were actually, in reality, extremely bad parents, to put it mildly. And this, I think, raises some very uncomfortable, broader questions. How were two mothers able to con 2.28 million people so effortlessly? We constantly hear about fake news in the mainstream media. Well, here we have fakery and fraud to a serious and even criminal level. And guess what? They were making a fantastic amount of money with those sorts of numbers. And yes, there's a critical question. Would anyone have ever known about it if one of the children in this nightmare hadn't escaped? If that child didn't do what he did, what would actually have happened in this story? Predictably, we see a lot of indignation about what has happened here, and while I share that indignation, my channel tends to cover far more serious crimes, such as when people are murdered. Now may be a good time to ask a broader question. Is it appropriate when a YouTuber like Ruby Franke manipulates those around her while profiting at others' expense to such a high degree, including at the expense of her own children? Is it appropriate? Is it appropriate that you can make so much money lying and manipulating while those closest to you suffer, and you're actually, in a way, using them? You know, you're using them as part of your storytelling. You know, they're props in your story. Is it appropriate to profit in such a way at somebody else's expense? Clearly not. Should she be given a slap on the wrist and allowed to continue creating content if the people really appreciate what she's saying and if it's popular? Clearly not. Now, according to an intercepted telephone call made from prison, Ruby Frank said, apparently, quote, "Adults have a really hard time understanding that children can be full of evil and what that takes to fight it. You've seen what it takes to fight evil." Well, I guess we have. Without the images and the police investigation, again, one has to wonder whether these words would have fallen on fallow ground. I mean, to the uncritical ear. If these words had been said in a YouTube video, what would people have thought? Would they have agreed with her? She went on to ramble, "It's not the person you're fighting, and it can look like something it's not, and you've been there, you know that. I don't know any adults who are going to see the truth, so I'm calm about this, and I just pray that you'll hang in there." Now, Ruby seems to be conflating children being children with spiritual warfare. Do you think that's a fair or accurate or appropriate comparison? Well, we know where that sort of thinking got Laurie Vallow and her family. And yet, if we're fair, what about taking this kind of thing where someone pretends to be who they're not, and someone pretends to be selling a story that's not true? If we take that into the true crime space, do we see a lot of creators constantly misdiagnosing, exaggerating, and sensationalizing cases? I know there's one creator that puts as his bio the fact that he's a contrarian, and their subscribers love it. You kind of get the sense that creators have learned that in order to get bang for their buck, it must be shocking. There must be shock value. Even if it's contrived, even if it's invented, even if it's not really true to the case, even if it's just speculation. But when it turns out that many of these speculations were ridiculous rabbit holes, no one seems to care. You almost get the sense that the subscribers got what they wanted. And what did they want? They wanted to be entertained. And some YouTube channels, even in the true crime space, even give as their topic entertainment, as the category which they fall into as entertainment, even if it's dealing with true crime. Now, when true crime creators get cases wrong, the subscribers don't seem to notice. That's certainly been my perception. There doesn't seem to be any downside if you make a mistake in your analysis or in what you predict is going to be the case. So you can exaggerate till the cows come home. If it turns out that reality is different, well, then it's okay. People were entertained along the way. And so can you see there's every incentive to turn reality into a show, to turn true crime, the deaths of people. You might say, no, Ruby Frank's totally different. Her poor children came out of this the worse for wear. But true crime is about real people who lost their lives. And then there are people around them that have suffered and sometimes are implicated, right? It's the same thing. It's the deaths of people, in crimes, turning that into a kind of drama that's all about the truth, all about learning, all about something that's supposed to be good for mankind, for the greater good. But in reality, it's actually serving the interests of the creator in a cynical way. So then it's not about truth or reality, but a kind of collective voyeurism. In other words, it's a contract to engage in shared emotions. Now, our world is superficial enough where how something looks superficially is good enough for us. So if there's the word doctor in front of your name in true crime, then that immediately confers upon you expertise. And let's face it, Ruby Frank looked good, looked attractive. But underneath that perfect exterior was a poisonous and toxic messiness. And so then how much is that exterior really worth? Even in serious cases where someone wanted to publish autopsy photos of Gannon Stork for a price, there was a temporary uproar. There was this incredible indignation. But that channel is back to business as usual. All has apparently been forgiven. I think if we're honest, we have to acknowledge that the mainstream media isn't the only place where fake news exists. YouTubers, some of them, use it as their bread and butter. where most of what they sell isn't actually the truth, isn't actually analysis that's based on truth. We've just seen in the Richard Allen case, the defense case, that this was all some sort of cult based on some, I can't even remember the Norse mythology. And then that whole idea is jumped on by YouTubers, but that's a defense case. Is that really what happened in that particular case? So YouTubers, some of them are, use fake news literally as their bread and butter. The fake news tends to be more shocking. And I can tell you, it's harder to make a living on YouTube telling the truth, being authentic, telling the harder story that is more subtle and less scary, I guess, and kind of messy. There's some parts that are better than one would expect and some that are worse. But I can tell you that is much harder than being a content whore and following the popular but fake path of least resistance. And I've seen most of my contemporaries do much better than I do. So I want you to look at the Ruby Franke case and ask whether you really care about the type of person you watch on YouTube. If you looked at Ruby Franke and you thought that she was the bee's knees, why was it that you didn't notice that there was something wrong there? Are we only able to tell something is wrong when we are shown? And the other thing is, do you care who these people really are? Do you care whether they are really qualified in their field? Do you care about what's really going on behind the scenes? If you do, then I think you've got to think about, if your favorite creator is a fraud, a Ruby Franke, could that be the same in true crime? Would you know if someone didn't escape and tell you in their case? Because the failure to know without being shown and told is all about a failure to think critically. And isn't what the true crime space is all about? Isn't that what the true crime space is all about? Learning to think critically, learning to put the pieces together without the full picture being shown. I do think there's also a wider cultural apparatus around this to deal with. There's something about Ruby Franke that reminds me of Laurie Vallow. Like Laurie, Ruby seems to turn people, or even her own children, into devils the moment she discovers they're not on her side. That's a particularly weak, unsubtle, black and white, but all too common way of seeing the world. And if your creator is showing you the world as black and white and very simple, well, then you're being manipulated, because that's tapping into a culture, one of trusting believers that are easy to take advantage of. One way to take advantage of simple-minded people is to oversimplify things and to make complicated, sophisticated realities appear more straightforward and clear and absolute than they really are. I mean, that is the gift of a conspiracy. It reduces a lot of information to something that's very catchy and scary, but also very oversimplified. In the true crime space, we also need to hold dodgy creators responsible, and I think there's something seriously wrong when a creator presents himself anonymously as a clown and he becomes the go-to guy for, in his own words, better true crime analysis. If we're honestly going to be talking about hypocrisy, and if everything is a joke, even where lives are lost, and that is what this genre is all about, then who is the joke on really? So maybe it is time that we get a bit more serious and hold our community, ourselves, our creators to higher standards. And I think the Ruby Franke case is a cautionary tale in that regard. What do you guys think? Thank you for listening. Thank you to the followers who appreciate this channel for its authenticity, and I'll see you guys next time.